What if the very thing that sets you apart is the key to everything you're striving for? Welcome to Uncommon Edge, the podcast for those who are done with the ordinary and ready to own what makes them different. I'm DJ Neumann, and if you're here, it's because you know you're built for more. You're uncommon by design, ready to break boundaries and build a life of purpose, success, and impact. Each week, we'll dive into hard-hitting strategies, raw stories from the trenches, and the tools that will sharpen your edge. From game-changing lessons to deep-diving interviews, this is your space to rise up, build, and make your mark. Whether you're growing a business, dreaming of starting one, or looking to level up in life, you'll leave each episode with insights and inspiration to make it happen. You weren't designed to blend in, you were designed to stand out. So if you're ready to defy the norm and bring out your best, let's dive in, get to work. Your journey to owning your uncommon edge starts now. Hey, welcome back to the Uncommon Edge. I'm DJ Neumann, and I want to get into this episode talking about asking better questions to unlock the keys to clarity and connection. In this episode, I want to teach you guys the power of asking concise, purposeful, and well-timed questions to get actionable answers to build better connections and sharpen your decision-making and your overall edge. See, this is the number one secret that I've used with all my mentors and everybody else that I've been working through. So what if the success you're chasing, whether it's in business, relationships, personal growth, comes down to just asking the right questions at the right time? Look, we've all been in that room, haven't we? Like sometimes someone spends like 10 minutes telling a story, building up all their thoughts, and the time that they finally, quote unquote, ask the question, like you don't even know what the question is. It's unclear what they actually want. Don't be that person. Being able to ask the right questions isn't just a skill, it's an edge that sets you apart. It gained me the attention of some multi-million-dollar mentors that I've had just to be concise. So in this episode, we'll break down the art of asking great questions, when, why, and how to ask simple skill that will transform the way you lead, connect, and grow. Fair enough? Cool. So asking the right questions can open doors. We've already understood this, and unlock opportunities and lead to clarity. But great leaders don't have all the answers. They know how to ask the right questions at the right time. So when should you be asking questions? Well, I want you to understand this isn't necessarily just about like spitballing the questions out. You start to ask questions when you actually need clarity. It's important to avoid assumptions. You know what they say about assumptions? It makes an ass out of you and me. That's the assume in assumptions. And it's funny to say it that way, but it's really important to understand that when you just start assuming you know what it means, it's one thing to think you understand or be familiar with the things that are being told to you, but it's a whole nother thing to maybe actually go out and apply them and actually have the wisdom from understanding what those applications actually do. You also should be asking questions when you're trying to uncover root issues or opportunities. Maybe an opportunity is right at your footstep, right in front of you, and you don't even understand it because you're not asking the right questions. This happens in relationships, personal and professional. This happens throughout business, all kinds of times. Think about one time you may have asked a question incorrectly, which triggered a certain action that all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's not what I expected. Well, maybe it's because you were asking the wrong questions. You should also know when to ask questions is when to empower others to think and solve problems. I do this all the time in my one-on-one meetings. If you just constantly spoon feed your employees or the people around you the answers all the time, it doesn't empower them. But if you allow them to come to their own conclusions through the question asking process, you start asking questions to them so they can start unearthing them. It becomes a amazing tool that you can start to wield in leadership. So Why does it work? When you start to ask questions, it actually builds trust. Think about this. People feel valued when you genuinely seek their insight. Most people just want to be understood, heard, and valued. So think about this. When you're in communication with somebody, what are the things that might start to cycle through those communications? And how can you start to inspire other people through those communications? The best way for me to explain this is when you're in a conversation and you're asking the right questions to actually seek and understand from somebody else. Sometimes people will come out of that conversation and say, man, that was the best conversation I ever had. And you know what? You didn't really say much. You just asked a few questions and then you let the other person do all the talking. You know, it's funny when this can also be wielded as a superpower to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Some people feel weird going into a social setting. Maybe you're going to that conference or whatever, and you're like, I don't want to put myself out there and start talking to people. Well, asking questions is a great way to do it because guess what? You don't have to do much talking. You just have to start, because I guarantee you the person on the other side of the room is thinking the same thing you are. And what a relief it is if somebody comes up and asks you a question because you broke the ice. And later in this episode, we might get into some ways to get the conversation going through questions, and I'll help you with that too. But for right now, let's keep talking about why this works. It's also going to create clarity. A great question cuts through the noise. Like a great question eliminates all doubt. It gets right to the point. There's no sugarcoating or beating around the bush. It's the thing that is going to the person who has the most clarity wins when it comes to questioning. And it also sparks innovation. The right question can always change the way somebody looks at a challenge. Have you ever had that experience where, you were like your heels were dug in the ground on a topic? You were, wanting to make sure that you're going to die on this hill. And then somebody all of a sudden asks you a question that makes you start to question that digging your heels in. Maybe a good point is brought up and it allows you to start thinking, maybe I'm not looking at this all the right way. So it's a great way to de-escalate situations. Maybe you have a rough customer that is all worked up in your lobby or on the phone with you. And by you asking clarifying questions, you can actually de-escalate a situation. When it comes to big thinks and big people asking questions, think about Elon Musk asking, like, how can we make space travel affordable? That one question reframed the way we approach aerospace in general with SpaceX. Nobody ever thought about a private company shooting rockets up into space, but somebody had to ask that question. Using your imagination in the question asking process is probably one of the biggest values you can bring to the table. So, let's break down. What is the anatomy of a great question? Like the how-to. So that way you're not that person the next time you're on a Zoom call and you raise that virtual hand, or maybe you're, in an audience and you raise your hand and you stand up and all of a sudden you feel that pressure in your chest, or maybe that bead of sweat starting to drip down your forehead because you just want to get it out. It's almost like, you remember that movie A Christmas Story, and Ralphie was asked by Santa Claus at the top of the slide, he's like, what do you want for Christmas? And all he wanted to say is Red Ryder BB gun, but he starts mumbling about some toys, and he was so panicked in the moment because the pressure was on. And then he gets slid down the slide and he stops himself. No, I want the Red Ryder BB gun, but it was too late. He says, just shoot your eye out, kid. And he just taps him on the forehead as he goes sliding down the slide. Sometimes you feel that way when it's spotlight on you to ask a question. You get that deer in headlights feel. So I'm going to give you some tools here to make sure you never feel that way again. Fair enough? All right. So let's break it down step by step. Start with the purpose. Like getting clear on what you actually need to know. And that might sound like too simple of a question to ask you right there, like what do you need to know? But what specific information do I need? Like the mission critical thing. Example, instead of asking, what should I do about marketing? Ask, what's the best marketing strategy to grow a local service business? See the difference there? What do I do about marketing? Well, what do you mean, what do I do about marketing? Are we marketing a retail store? Are we marketing a service business? What are we marketing? But what's the best marketing strategy to grow a local service business? Okay, that gets a little more specific. You know, I'm not going to start talking about national ad campaigns with you when it comes to a local service business. Be clear and concise. Use fewer words to eliminate confusion. So, for example, instead of giving a 5-minute story, frame it like this. What do you think is the biggest factor in retaining great employees? If that is what you're interested in. Instead of talking about, oh, well, you know, I had this problem with Bill and Bill turned out to be this. And next thing I know, he was doing this to Sally and then I had an issue with customer over here. And then, Bill ended up having this issue with John and you start giving all this context and all this stuff. And at the end of the day, the person you're asking the question from is going to be like, well, what's the question? I've seen this live in person multiple times. What's the question? And I want you to understand that it is super important not to do that. If the person that you are asking the question needs more context, they will ask. But chances are they don't need the context because, see, you're in the forest right now. You are shimmying through the trees. You are like so thick in it. You are so thick inside that wood. And all of a sudden, you can't see the path. But the mentor, they're looking at it from like a 60,000 foot overview. They can see every little path from above, and they don't need the context of the chipmunk that you're seeing there, because right now, the question you're asking is, how do I get out of the woods? Well, they can see the path. You just got to ask, how do I get out of the woods? And maybe they need a little context. They'll guide you through it. So be clear and concise. And when you are asking the questions, make sure they're a little open-ended. Try to avoid yes or no questions, because that's going to lead to more assumptions. When you're asking a mentor or somebody, maybe it's you're in a one-on-one with an employee or whatever it is, ask open-ended questions. Open-ended questions get you more valuable insights than just yes or no. For example, instead of this is a good idea, like, is this a good idea? Ask, what would you do to improve this idea? Their context will give you the yes or no, but you might be able to get more insights based on that. And when you're asking these questions, you need to be specific. Like, frame your question with context, but keep it short. Like, for example, here's a good way of doing it. You can say, I've been struggling with delegating tasks effectively. What's worked for you in empowering your team? Okay. See, I gave a little context, but I didn't sit there and say, on Tuesdays, I sit there and I work on my email, and then as I'm doing the email, then this distraction comes up, and so on and so forth, and you go through this whole thing about I gave Sally the job, and then she ends up going to do another thing, and I didn't follow up with her, and all this stuff. You don't need all that. Hey, I've been struggling with delegating tasks. Okay. What's worked for you in empowering your team through delegation? And then the most important part, and this is hard. I've even struggled with this when I'm dealing with mentors. Listen and then stay quiet. Like, shut up. Stop talking. When you've asked your question, give the other person the space to respond. If they need more details, they'll ask you for them. And here's a pro tip. Avoid interrupting or steering the answer, trying to get something out of them. Avoid doing that. Nothing will upset somebody more than if you constantly cut them off when they're trying to help you out. Because if you had the answers, you wouldn't be asking the question. So learn to receive, then rather always try to give. All right, so I want to give you some practical tips here now on building the habit of asking good questions, especially if you're going into an environment where you're going to be asking questions. Like, for example, maybe you're going to a seminar, or maybe you and I get on a call together, or whatever it might be. Maybe you're going into a one-on-one with your employees, or maybe with a superior, or maybe you're about to get into a discussion with your significant other. Whatever that might be, do a little preparation ahead of time. Think through the questions you'll need before meeting or going into any type of session. Go in the room with intentionality. Look, more than anything, this shows respect and keeps things on track when you are doing this. I use a notebook, or I'll use my phone app. I'll get in my memos thing, or there's a great app called Good Notes that I use, and I'll just start popping questions in. So when I get an opportunity to ask a question, I'm prepared, ready to go. Look, if you've ever felt unlucky, chances are it's because you didn't do the proper preparations. Because, see, luck is when opportunity and preparation intersect. So one of the best ways you can prepare to have good questions is have them ready to go. You never know when you're going to be around somebody, and you can have a list. You can categorize them out from leadership to finance to operations to personal development, whatever. You can have these things ready to go. And when you finally, get that preparation, you should also, when you get the question, practice active listening. Focus on the answer. Don't just wait for your turn to talk. A lot of times, and I'm guilty of this too, you ask the question, you finally get off your chest, you say, hey, there's my question. And it just comes out of you. And then you're breathing, and you're like, okay, I got it out. And the whole time you're getting the response, and you're thinking of the next thing to say, and you're not even taking the question because your cup is so full. Empty your cup in that moment and allow the person to actually fill your cup up with the answer. And, that takes intentionality, that takes preparation, and that takes active listening to be able to do that. Good questions don't stop at asking. They hinge on how well you listen. Because as you're listening to actually comprehend and understand what is being thrown at you. And in the midst of all of that, you're going to get little nuggets that you can ask follow-up questions on if you need additional clarity, practicing these same things that we've been talking about. And sometimes you need to reframe a bad question. Maybe you get so excited you spit out a bad question. That's okay. It happens. It happens to the best of us, myself included. But let's reframe it. Instead of asking something and maybe you're frustrated, why doesn't this work? Maybe replace that with, what can we change to make this work better? Do you see the difference there? That's turning a negative or vague question into something that's going to yield a clear answer. Because now we're after what we can change to make this work. And don't get put off by the nuance of these details, because this does help. And now that you've actively listened and you've reframed the question, you got everything gone, you've done your preparation, this now allows you to follow up. It allows you to dig deeper when needed, like when you get that feedback, instead of saying something like, what makes you say that? Or you can say, like, can you elaborate on that point a little more? Or hone in on a very specific thing or a word that they chose to use in that answer. I'm telling you right now, the skill that it takes to do this and grow this whole question asking thing is a lifelong process. It's hard. Myself included. I go through these and I ask myself questions all the time. And as you're going through and asking some of the hard questions, sometimes you need to ask questions that you don't even want the answers to. I'll tell you, that is the hardest questions to ask. But you need to get those answers if you want to grow and move forward. Look, real life applications to pull all this together. When you do this, I want you to start also looking at like what not to do. Look, when your question isn't clear, your answers won't be either. Like, there was a time I was on a call and this guy just kept rambling over and over and over. He just blah, 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 to the point, like, you saw people's eyes glazing over. The mentor on the call was just like, finally, he just cut him off. He goes, hey, stop. If I need more, I'll ask. And I know I've said this a few times on this episode already, but I want to really drive it home that it's also okay when you're a bad questioner to laugh at yourself a little bit and understand that it is a learned skill. You got to put the reps in. If you were a perfect question asker right off the rip every single time, it's not even remotely possible off the cuff, because it takes skill. It takes humbleness. Here's a prime example. I'll get a little real with you. I was at an event. It was actually a Grant Cardone event. It was the follow-up for GrowthCon, and I got all excited. It was my first GrowthCon that I'd ever been to, and if you've ever been to like one of those types of events or anything like that gets you all hyped up and the energy is just infectious and all this stuff, I'm front row, man, and I was just like, I was bought in. I was leaning in. I had all this type of stuff, and I jumped up and I'm asking a question, and I just started verbal vomiting, and I thought I was hot shit in the moment, if I'm being honest, and I got humbled in the moment, and in that moment, when I got humbled because I wasn't asking good questions, man, I sunk into my seat. It wasn't anything I felt good about, but it taught me a valuable lesson to breathe and to understand that you have to come prepared. You can't just constantly shoot off the cuff. Sometimes it might work out shooting off the cuff, but not all the time. So come prepared. When you are the great questioner, this is when you become a leader, like a coach. Think about like the coach that you admire who may have reframed a question for you or whatever. Their questions weren't complicated, but they made you stop and think. Has that ever happened to you where somebody said something to you where it was a question or something along those lines, and all of a sudden you're just like, well, damn. Yeah, that is what it is. Asking the right questions will shift your perspective, and it'll even unlock solutions that you didn't know. Sometimes asking the right questions, especially doing the deep work, asking questions of yourself internally, doing that deep work on yourself, you will unlock things that you don't even know about yourself right now. For example, I used to ask, why isn't this working? And then I started to ask, what can I do differently? That subtle shift changes everything. If you've done what you've always done, you're going to get what you've always gotten. Maybe it's something that you're used to doing. It's a habit. Maybe it's that cocktail that you're going for when you're out doing social stuff. Maybe it's the scrolling on TikTok or whatever it is. Whatever that thing is that brings you comfort, sometimes that can end up hindering you, and maybe changing that little habit can reframe the mindset that you're in to allow those proper questions to actually come out. So, I have some questions for you. What's the one question I've been meaning to ask, but I haven't asked yet? Or I should say you. What's the one question you've been meaning to ask, but you haven't asked yet? I want you to kind of reflect on these questions. If I had to answer this one question and I haven't asked it yet, what would it be? And then here's another question to ask yourself. How can I ask it in a way that's clear and actionable? And what's a situation where I can practice asking better questions today? I don't know where you're listening from right now. It could be in your car. It could be, in the shower or wherever you're at, at work, whatever it is. And you're maybe just starting your day, or maybe you're just ending your day. But how can you ask better questions? Maybe you can ask better questions to your kids. One of the things that I do with my kids all the time is instead of asking, how was your day? I'll ask things like, hey, what made you smile today? What's something that you learned today? What was something that happened that was really funny? Or what was something that you did that made you really proud of yourself? Or my favorite question of all that I ask my kids, what are you grateful for today? When you ask intentional questions, you will get surprising answers. If you just ask, how was your day today? Oh, it was fine. But when you ask, what do I do, or what did I do to get something that made me proud today? What was it that made me proud? That asks a whole other thing. So now that we've gotten this framework out a little bit, I want to have you break this into, have you ever heard of the Ford method? See, I'm from Metro Detroit, as you know, and Ford was known for asking great questions. And one of the ways he did it, he actually used an acronym called FORD, F-O-R-D. And this is a framework on how you can actually navigate questions in social settings. And one of the things that you can do is it starts with F, and that's family. So start asking questions about family. Hey, are you married? Do you have any kids? What about your pets? You got any pets? Like, what's that look like? Oh, grandparents, grandkids, all those types of questions that come up because they're easy to talk about. People typically like to talk about their family. Maybe not. Maybe you got a weird Uncle Joe somewhere that you don't want to talk about. That's okay. We all got a weird Uncle Joe somewhere. But you know what? At the end of the day, it starts with F for family. Then you go into O, F-O. O is occupation. So, hey, what do you do for a living? What is it that you do for fun? What are the things that you are skilled at? What seminars have you gone to lately? Like what are the things that, you do? And the next thing you know, people start talking about, what they do. And you can learn a lot, and ask the follow-up questions from there. The next one, R, is recreation. What do you do for fun, man? Like, hey, you into music? You into sports? You play tennis? You into football? Unfortunately, here in the Lions country, it didn't quite work out the way that we had hoped. We had that episode a few episodes back where we talked about the Lions, but they still learned a lot from all that. But at the end of the day, like, what is it that you do for fun? And the last one is the D. What are your dreams? What are your ambitions? What are the things that light your fire? Navigating through these conversations using the Ford method is a great way to ask questions and use this tool. So I want you to start to think about how we can bring this all together and how to use this to empower and sharpen your uncommon edge. See, the edge isn't about having all the right answers. It's about asking the right questions. So try it today. Pick one area of your life or your business and ask the question, what could unlock something extraordinary? What is that one piece of advice that you really need to be able to draw out? And who do you want to ask those questions to? Is it a colleague? Is it your business associate? Is it a client? Is it your wife? Is it your significant other? Is it your kids? Is it your parents? Most relationships crumble due to a lack of understanding. And the more intentional you get with your questions, the more understanding you will have. And the more understood that other person will be. This is an amazing sales strategy as well. When I take calls in my business, I don't just go right into, oh, yep, here's your solution. No, even if I think I know, again, we're not doing the assume thing. Even if I think I know, I'm going to ask the questions to find out what the client actually wants and needs. And when I ask the question, I shut up and I listen. And then as I need more context, I'll ask again. And as I get more and more deeper into that conversation, it will give me the tools to unlock the ability to help that person 10 times better than just spitting off at the mouth and giving the answer. So at the end of the day, I want you to try this out for size. Just get out there and ask questions. Practice asking questions intentionally. There's a great book that you can check out as well. Amazing resource called Good Leaders Ask Great Questions by John Maxwell. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it, especially if this is something that you're trying to build this skill set up, which is absolutely monumental to have if you want to be in any type of leadership role. And you might be asking yourself, well, DJ, I'm not really in a leadership role because, I don't have people under me or whatever. No, I'm not going to let you get away with that one because here's the secret sauce to this here. You are in a leadership position because you have to lead yourself first. Before you can lead anybody, you have to lead yourself. And in order to lead yourself, you have to ask the correct questions to yourself to actually get the answers that you need to move on to the next thing. Maybe you're leading your kids, so you got to ask great questions there. And when it's all coming out in the wash, you need to find out what those are. And I hope this conversation that we're having today is kind of stirring the pot in your mind a little bit and making you think like, well, maybe I haven't been asking the right questions. Maybe I was that person rambling on. Maybe, I can be more intentional with my relationships. Maybe I can be more active when I'm listening. So I want to kind of end it here and just get you to start to think about all those different questions. And lastly, there's going to be a link in the description of where you're listening to this of how you can submit your questions. One of the things I want to do here is do like an Ask Me Anything spotlight where I can start bringing your questions on air and getting your questions answered. So hopefully everybody that's submitting into that thing takes the time to listen to this episode so that way we can get clear, concise answers, because I guarantee you the questions you have aren't just had by you. And that's the other thing I want to end this on. And when you're in that seminar, you're on that Zoom meeting, the way you show up is how people are going to show up for you. So get out there and ask the question, because guaranteed the question that you have, there's probably somebody in that room, whether in Zoom or in person, that has the same question as you. And by you acting out and being brave and asking the question that needed to be asked, you have saved somebody in the audience. You were a hero in that moment. They had that sigh of relief. Oh my God, thank you. And you're wondering exactly how did they stand up and know exactly what was on their mind. And it's because everybody has the same types of questions, man. So with that being said, stand out, stay sharp, and until next time, keep your uncommon edge out there. Be great.